Welcome to the Selling in the Motor Trade podcast, in association with Simcoe Training. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bowkett. Now, some of you probably already know me as Skippy. I want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Selling in the Motor Trade. Today, I'm joined with my good friend, Jason Cranswick, and we're going to be talking about book club again. Thank you very much for all the feedback from our other books we've covered in the book club. So you clearly like it, so that's why we're doing it again. And welcome back, Jason.
Good evening, mate. Good to see you again. Thanks for welcoming me back.
Yeah, it is. I do enjoy these, and it's something I want to start off with. We said at the end of our last one, by us reviewing these books and books we've read in the past, and we had to go back into it, something I've learned here, Jason, is when you have to read it to talk about it for half an hour, it's made me look at these books in more depth. Okay. And it's something I said before, if you train someone, you have to really know it. And I've just found, going back to this, a classic book, a great book, I've just looked at a whole new light again. Have you done the same thing with these?
You know what, I have, mate. And it's funny you say that, because it is forcing me to make sure that I know the topic or know the topic better. Likewise, I think we all sort of travel fast in our world, don't we? So it's forcing me just to slow down a little bit and just reflect. So yeah, I would agree with you. It's I'm enjoying doing this. Whether other people are enjoying us doing it, they're cool, but I'm enjoying doing it.
They are. We get the emails and the responses. So thank you everyone out there. So the book this time is James Clear's The Atomic Habits. Now, for the people watching this, we know most people listen to the podcast, but you'll notice this time, Jason and I have just picked up a copy of our book. And Jason, this one, I listened to this book on the roads and in hotels all the time. You went back and read the book physically. How do you find the difference?
To be fair, I only read the book for the first time tail end of last year. So It's a relatively new read for me. And we were talking about this before. I was actually introduced to this by my son. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that today as well. But what I have done is I listened to it again in the car over the last couple of weeks. And I think one thing we said about this before, it's actually a better read than a listen.
Yeah.
Whereas when we did Chimp was a really easy listen and you absorbed a lot more. This, if you listen to it, you'll get 10%. If you read it, you'll get the critical 25% plus that I think you need with this one.
Yeah. And we don't know why. We kicked this around before. I imagine with a book, when I'm reading a book like this, and again, it's many years since I read it, so I've just listened to it this time. But when I read it, I suppose you can stop, you sit there, you reflect and think, I did that in my business. Oh, I understand how that works. That makes sense. With the recording, you don't tend to hit the pause button. You don't tend to do that. You just listen to the whole lot there. And maybe your mind hasn't got time to digest it, if that's the right word.
Yeah. And the other thing, it's got pictures in it.
Yes. Yeah.
We love books with pictures.
Great little pictures. Now, the whole premise of this book, if we can sum it up, it's our habits that really create our lives. And sometimes you want to create an atomic habit, which is actually quite small. And what I got from it, they might sound like little habits, but it's the little habits that actually make a huge impact down the track. And this 1%, if you improve just 1% a day, it's, 37% over 12 months improvement.
It is.
And to sum that up, I suppose it brings us back to British racing team, cycling team.
We spoke last time, didn't we, Skip, about Brailsford and the aggregation of marginal gains. And, we always talk about this kind of small increments. And again, this book talks a lot about the compound effect.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm reading some notes I made on it, but it was the... So look, the Sorites paradox, apparently it's called, which is the compound effect, and I think that's the essence of this book, is making very small but regular increments of change or steps of improvement when you then look back over time, it's a significant quantum jump you end up taking. And I think what James Clear talks about a lot in here is, habits are just reliable solutions for reoccurring problems. That's what his premise is just find a new way of tackling problems. And if it becomes a habit, the likelihood it's going to stick. And I think that's the kind of moral of the story.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what I got from it as well. One of the stories he talks about is the ice cube moment. Okay, so an ice cube, okay, in a room, we know that it needs to be over 1 degree to start melting. So you put all the heat into the room, okay, and you're -10, -15. It takes so much energy to get that room up to 0. But if you look at the ice cube, nothing's happened. And that's where I think lots of people start making changes to either lose weight, save money, improve their business process, write a book, and they don't see anything happening. And he went on lots about the story about all the energy goes into getting it to, well, they talked about Fahrenheit. So what's that, 38 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever it is. I'm a metric country. But when it gets to positive temperatures, then the ice starts melting quickly.
It's finding that tipping point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I was listening to this again the other day, there's a whole section that talks about kind of getting through the valley of disappointments. So the point where people give up, you've got to get through that. And then the other one is the platitude of latent potential. And he talks about people that are seen as an overnight success. But actually what you don't see is the many hours, many weeks, many months, many years of effort going in to bring it up to that boiling point or to that melting point. And then suddenly it appears to just happen overnight. So I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here, but it is written in a way that I think a lot of people in our industry would enjoy and absorb. And actually there's quite a lot of useful stuff in it, not just useful story, but useful hints and tips.
I think this is any service manager, any sales manager instantly could go back and put this in place. And another thing that I really got from this is patience. You need patience. Keep on doing it. Those habits will work. And people give up far too easily on so many things. But also, it's the lag factor. Again, we've touched on that before, but he really sums that up so well. I suppose you don't get fat by eating one pizza, and you don't get skinny by eating one salad.
No.
It's the habits to do either of those that really makes the difference.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when the book was first introduced to me last year by my son. He was saying, "Dad, there's one of the things he talks about in here is habit stacking."
Oh, yes.
So actually, kind of like the sequence of, well, when I do this, then I do that, and it's almost, if you get that stack of habits right, the likelihood is you're going to become, it's going to sustain. It's going to become self-reinforced. So I only have I only do this. I only have a run after I've put my trainers on. So actually, the first action is putting your trainers on. And I know a lot of this sounds a bit basic. It's probably a basic example, but it's almost layering up the habits so that one becomes a natural consequence of the other, and that's what makes it sticky.
I'll go give you a real world scenario there. So I spend far too much time in the car. You do as well. And I'm at the age now, I'm starting to get, I think they call it sciatica, the pain down the. So I've been to a physiotherapist. And yeah, I am. So what you need to do is stand on one leg or the other leg. And I could never do it until habit stacking. So now when I clean my toothpaste, I don't clean that, cleaning my teeth. I just sit there and I'm cleaning my teeth. I stand on one leg for half the time and then the other one. That's, I suppose, in my world, the best habit stacking, because I'd always forget to do it. Okay. But I don't forget to clean my teeth. So I do my teeth every morning, every night. So when I do it, it's one leg for half the time, then the other one. Now I don't think about it because that's just what I do. And that habit stacking really helped me.
Yeah. There's a couple of other bits I've taken from this. I took from it, when I first read it, is kind of the benefit of actually journaling. And I don't want to sound too sort of like new age with it, but actually, committing things to paper, and I do a daily journal now, which I didn't do before, and use it a way of recording the habits. And I get a bit cross with myself if I've said that a habit I'm going to do is to do exercise regularly, and then you get to the end of the 7th day and you go cross, cross, cross. So I think journaling is something that is a really interesting reference point here. The other one, and I was listening to it this evening, sort of just to recap on a few bits: goals versus systems.
Oh yes.
So we all have a dream, we all have a goal, don't we? And Brailsford used to talk about, well, a goal would be to win the Tour de France, but the system is, the method that's applied to achieve that goal. So the most important thing is the system or the process. We talk often, don't we, about, believe in the process. But actually, this is a really good example of where there is a method to this, that if you use it, you're likely to get a better outcome.
Well, again, when I first read about goals, do goals actually work? Now, I struggle with this because I love goal setting. Goal setting in my life has done a lot for me. But when he breaks it down, everyone has a goal to win the Tour de France. Everyone had a goal to win the World Cup in rugby, okay? They're all the goals. But actually, it's breaking that goal down into the process, the system, the bits you need to do. And I suppose too many people are guilty of having a goal without breaking it down into the small steps at the process goal, not just the outcome goal.
Yeah. Sorry, go.
No. I was just going to say the story of the paperclip. There's a great story there that relates, I think, perfectly to the motor trade. And in fact, we've done this with one of our clients, and there's a guy called Gareth who I don't know if will be listening to this or not. I hope he does, because he's taken this on board. This is a story about a stockbroker, I think it was, who wanted to prove the amount of calls he had to make. He wanted to make something like 120 calls a day to reach his target. Okay, there he knew the target, what he wanted to sell. That was the goal. But then the process, the system then was 120 calls I need to make every day. So he just had a couple of cups with paper clips in it. There's 120 paper clips in one cup. Every time he made a call, he just put the paper clip into the other cup. I just love the simplicity of that. You can see a visual cue all the time. You can see if you're almost there or not. Halfway through the day, you could visually see if you're on track or not before you had lunch. It's so simple. And there's a guy called Gareth, works in a company called Leasing Options that we work with. He done exactly that. How many prospecting calls he had to make? I can't remember the number, but he would just change his paper clips from one side to the other. And he's been doing that for the last, 5 or 6 years now. And he still raves about that. I just got a lot from that little story there.
It's funny though, to get, we first got together talking about process, sales process, wasn't it? And it's that reality, and there's metrics through the process, which means once you know what those metrics are and go back to the top of the funnel and say, okay, well, as long as I do this, then that will happen. And it's funny because James talks about it in the book. It's the whole concept of, and it's called ITTD, if this, then that.
Yes.
And it's the same if you've ever spent any time with developers and coders in the IT world. That's how they write code. It's a set of rules that say, if this, then that happens. If this, then that happens. And it's kind of the binary. And I think, we spend our life in this industry wanting to have freedoms, and that's right, freedoms within a framework. But I think what we've also got to have is an awareness of the process and the KPIs that are undeniable. And once we know what they are, then let's focus up the top of the funnel and say, okay, so as a result of that, if I want to sell X, and I know my conversion from test drive to order is this, and from inquiry to test drive is this, okay, in which case then I need this much inquiries, and focus on the activity. That's what Atomic Habits reminded me of relative to our industry.
I know we're 2024 now, and as an industry, we've done it really well. But please, if you're a sales manager listening to this, don't be just going in next month and say, right, how many cars are we going to sell this month? There's our target. I want X number from Billy. Jane's got to do such and such and whatever. Please break it down to how many people they need to speak to, how many qualified customers they need, how many demonstrations they need to do, how many times they need to put a Foursquare or your deal stack in front of them. Get the activity right, and the results will look after themselves. And track the activity. Get that bit right, and the results will look after themselves. We know this stuff. You'll listen to this. You'll know that. But are we doing it? Are we measuring it all the time?
Well, has it become a habit? I think that's the reality. And I think that's where,
that's
it's as if we almost wrote the script on this one, Skippy.
Yeah.
It's how do you turn it into a habit? And not just you as the leader or manager, but also how do you get your team to adopt the habit so that it becomes, sustained and repeatable and predictable. And, I think, that's the, that reliable solutions to recurring problems statement is what a habit helps you overcome. So I think there's some real relevance for businesses like ours. But I think just life in general, I think, there's a big place for having process and a method and a playbook to what you're doing rather than just freestyle.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to be controversial now. I love technology. Okay. I'm not anti computers. Let's not go down that route. But I think sometimes computers have made things easier. InquiryMax does that for us. Okay. DealerWeb does that for us. So it tracks all of our activity and everything. Whereas I want to go back in time when we had an old piece of paper, a central daily log, and every time a salesperson had to come in and speak to a manager would have the ability to how they like the demo, where they're up to, what's happening. They could track it in the sales meeting. Now, I know these systems do all of that, but you've got to get into the habit of switch it on and look at it and get there. So that might be controversial. I've got lots of people there from these systems yelling at me now, saying now our system's brilliant. And I do fundamentally believe in them. So please don't take that the wrong way. But does it make us?
Yeah. There's a concept in there that I remember talking about many years ago, that's linked to Sully, the pilot that landed the plane on the Hudson River. And, when the bird strike hit, he still had the tacit skills to know how to land the plane.
Yes.
Because all the inputs to the computer were telling him you couldn't land the plane on the Hudson River. There was no need to land the plane on the Hudson River. And all of the modeling said that the data ultimately would have crashed the plane before it could have got to a safe spot. And so there is a big thing in this. I'm just looking at some books in my office here. There's another one called The Glass Cage, which talks all about this, kind of like never lose the skill of how to do it manually, because it's great to pass it over to systems, and things should be system based. But if you don't know how the mechanics of it work, you'll never land the plane on the Hudson River when the computer says no. Now, obviously, systems have advanced a lot over recent years and aircraft safety has developed even further. But there is a bit in this one which is never losing, or firstly gaining, and then never losing the tacit skill of how to do it mechanically.
Yeah.
So you know that the computer is performing as designed.
What I love about that, I was blessed to meet Sully at one of the NADA conferences. Fascinating. And you would know that I love light aircraft and aviation, stuff like that. The other thing is his first officer went through a checklist. And in the checklist, starting the APU was on page 3 or something like that. Sully manually said, we're going to need power for the instruments, and immediately started the auxiliary power unit well and truly before he was meant to, because he understood we're going to need that to be able to do it. If he followed the checklist, everyone died on that. Yeah. Absolutely. I just, it's so true. We need to know the basics in it and then let the technology. I took a lot from that.
Exactly.
I suppose that ties into the Michael Phelps story as well. Michael Phelps with the Michael Phelps story was, one of the best Olympic swimmers of all times. I can't remember if it was 28 gold medals or something like that. His coach, they just got him to visualize every night his races from start to finish before he went to sleep. He actually, the routine was every day he got up, he had the same time he got up, the same breakfast, the same, put his things on the same way, listen to the same music the way there. So when it was race day, it was just exactly the same habits that they formed. And you think, oh, that's nice. But the kick of that story is at the Beijing Olympics, whatever year that was, he dives into the pool for the 200-meter race and his goggles come off. Water is flowing in there. Okay. Now, again, he can't see, he's blinded, but he swims 200 meters. What's that? 4 lengths of Olympic-sized swimming pool, almost blinded, but he could only do that because of the routines, the habits they just got into day in, day out. Stories like that.
Memory.
Muscle memory.
Muscle memory, isn't it?
It's absolutely that. And the visualization must have a lot to do with that as well.
Yeah.
But for me, it's not just visualization, having the habit to do it every single night, going to bed without fail. This is what I do. It's
do you know though, Skip, what I've enjoyed about the last few books we've done, and also where some of the books that we've said we should do over time, some of the recurring themes in here are around that sort of, the 1% factor. Getting 100% better comes as, 101% improvements. The fact that, the whole excellence is 10,000 hours or whatever it might be, so you can't cheat it. There's some things you can do to accelerate it further, and some practices that will get you over the hump and through the valley of complacency, or whatever he calls it. But there's a lot that you can do, as if you are committed and if you are motivated to do it. I think that's a big thing. We were talking off camera early on about, we can't force anybody to read a book. If you don't want to read a book, don't read a book. It's your call.
Yeah.
But this is where, if we're talking about delivering, it's not even the difference between average and high performance. This is the difference between high performance and elite. And I know you had Gareth on before talking about what elite performance is. It's that commitment to it. It's the willingness to invest in the process improvement, and the staying power to stick with it when you think either it's not going to happen or you've done enough. Could be either or. So there's a big thing in here. I think this is a great read for anybody who's wanting to propel themselves further, faster, better in an industry like ours.
But then he goes into real practical things. Now, these people who are great, disciplined people, you think it's great discipline. And Gareth, in the podcast and his book again, he talks about this. The people that we see as disciplined from the outside, actually, some of them say, I'm actually quite lazy. I make my environment so easy to make myself disciplined. I actually put my running shoes out in the morning, so I have to get straight into them. I have to just start, because I know if I didn't start, I wouldn't do it. And it's, I suppose the story for that on me is the university dean who starts a photography course. He said, I'm going to have an experiment. Half of you guys, all I want you to do is send one photograph in, and you're going to be judged on that photograph. The other half, you're going to be judged on how many photographs you actually turn in for your final assignment. So again, you sit there and think, hold on, if you're a student, you've only got one photograph to turn in, you're going to be judged on. That'll be the best. Okay, these other people got to do hundreds. Now, of course, you get to the end of it, that one photograph is mediocre, because they overanalyze, they overplan, they go into the psychology of what's a good photograph. But the other people just had to do it and do it and do it. And by doing it, they become better and better. And I don't know the actual numbers there, but I think the pass rate in the ones that had to send the most photographs in was, I can't remember now, but it's double or something like that.
Materially higher. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think the other one linked to that as well that resonated with me in here is the identity-based habits. And he talks about someone who was offered a cigarette, someone who was giving up smoking and was offered a cigarette. And, one response was, no, not for me, I'm trying to quit. Whereas someone else responding to the same situation said, not for me, I'm not a smoker. So it's that commitment to, again, comes back to the process, isn't it? Is they've already made that step, that they are the thing they're working towards. So they've already started to embody it.
Yes.
And again, I think that's a big thing is, the place for belief and confidence. By the same token, without putting unnecessary obstacles or delusion in your place. So there's some fascinating life messages in this one. And You know,
It's
that's really why I enjoyed it so much.
it's not changing habits. It's actually changing who you are. Um, that's what this book is. Now, one bit I kind of struggled with to start with, but I think I know where he's going with it. He says, just do 2 minutes a day. Okay. Any task is 2 minutes a day. And I thought, well, hold on. That's bollocks. Okay. If I just run 2 minutes a day,
A
that's not
technical
going to
term.
work. Yes, a technical term. But of course, it's just starting. That's what he's really driving at, isn't it? Because if you say, right, so here's a challenge. Some of you people listen to this. You'll listen to this because you say, right, I want to read. Some of you people will not be readers. Okay. So here's the challenge. Just read one page a night. And I suppose the theory is when you read one page, you'll start saying, oh, I'll just read the other one. I'll read the other one. So if you just read one page a night, just run for, what do you say, 2 minutes? Anything you can do for 2 minutes,
Yep.
just to start. I suppose that's the key, start it.
Yeah, yeah. We mentioned before, you know, I got introduced to this by my son, who he's, 26 years old. You know, he's making his way in the world doing some really good stuff. But he picked up Atomic Habits because I think he wanted to make sure that he had, the right processes in place. And he's independent, so he wanted to make sure that he had his own method. And certainly it's impressed me how he introduced me to journaling, and
Okay.
making sure that there's a kind of written commitment. So it's funny, a lot of this stuff, we're sat here as a couple of old farts, really, aren't we?
Yep.
Talking about as if we know everything and all these experiences we've had. But the reality is, these driven individuals now, are much younger than we are, Skippy.
So true.
But there's a thing in here which this covers all age range, all different motivations. But I guess what it's really aimed for is those that want to perform to a high level,
Yep.
want to put in place, sustainable habits and methods that will stand them in good stead for the long term. And as I say, I think it's a great one for everybody to go and explore.
Very good book. Now, listen, we're not going to go into this. I really want the listeners to go and find this book. Okay, probably read it. Go to Amazon and read it. I think you have to read this physically, this one. Okay, but he talks about real practical stuff here. The 4 laws he talks about behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And then again, if you don't want to get rid of bad habits, do the opposite of it. Okay, make it hard to do, make it very unattractive. Okay, make it not satisfying at all. And he gives you some real practical tips and ideas on if you want to get fit, run a marathon, improve your finances, start that business. So many practical steps there.
It's funny. There you go. A flip to the pages where it covers it. Talks about
you've got it.
making good habits. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. Breaking bad habits, make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, make it unsatisfying. It's basic stuff. This, but actually, it's great to be able to just pick it up and go, that's what I need to do.
Listen, what I want to finish this on is environment. And I'm going to ask you, because you have teams, you have different teams with different cultures in the businesses. Everyone knows who you are now, Jason, but the people who don't know Jason, he runs Marabeni Group in the UK, and there are 3 distinct different teams, I think it's fair to say, from Norton Way, the RRG, HPL, and different cultures. And I love the idea in this book. He said environment is one of the other key things. You got to look at the habits, because you can take someone from one environment to a different environment and they're suddenly a great performer or a poor performer. And you look at the person and they're not different. So it's the environment. I want to get your views on how do we work on getting that culture environment right. And the biggest story for me on this, and it sends shivers up my spine, about the people addicted to heroin in the Vietnam War. The numbers were something like 30 or 40% of the soldiers, the American soldiers, were addicted to heroin, I think. They set up clinics everywhere and helped to get these people off. There were lots of politicians saying, oh, we got to be careful bringing these soldiers home because it's going to be a huge issue in America. But the environment out there, horrendous environments, their mates were doing heroin. It was easy to get to. It got them through. When they come back home, they were in a completely different environment and they didn't need it to get through. So the question I have for you is, how important is environment to be top performers in the team? And
yeah, I'm sorry, Skip, I cut across you then.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's a tough one. I don't know how you start getting that culture, that environment right.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. There's a saying, culture trumps strategy every time, and it's true. And to get the culture right, it can't just be top down. It's got to be something that collectively the majority buy into. I think the setting, if that's what we're talking about, is hugely important. And I think it is defined by the values of the business and the leadership within the business. So these are all the factors. You can't fake it. You can't fake a good culture. It's quite revealing if it is or it isn't. And it comes back to the setting that the leadership itself creates for the business. And we have different settings within our business. You've named them. I'm deeply involved with the Norton Way business. Aaron very much runs the RRG business, and Jonathan still the HPL business, and they set the tone for what's right for them. But once the tone is set, it's then understood well by everybody, and it becomes the raison d'etre. It's the playbook that everybody works by. I think what I would say though is in doing that, in creating the setting, it is exhausting. It is the most challenging job any leader can have, but it's the one thing that will influence success most of all.
Yeah, and people like to emulate what they see day in, day out. And again, managers, listen to this. If you're allowing your salesperson to turn up late every day, but he's your top guy, it doesn't matter. You're allowing everyone else. That's the culture. If you're allowing you guys not to do a system or process you allow one person to do it, you're telling everyone else it's not
Everybody
the right way.
Sees it. Yes. Everybody sees it. I think that's the bit is, you've got to have a very strong moral compass. It's really, really important in our business is that you've got to be able to do things you'd happily describe to your mother.
Yeah.
That's really important. The mother test is really important. Yeah. But ultimately, if you've got a good understanding of the framework of your setting, you've set the right cultural template, you reinforce the right behaviors, and you encourage others to buy into it too, then it is a majority rule. So you will need most people to buy in for it to ultimately work well. And you need to address where members of the team don't buy into the same picture. But ultimately, we've got to be motivated, energizing as individuals, and we've got to have a really clear framework within which we operate. Those are the things that I believe by, right or wrong. That's what I think is what creates a high performance culture.
I just want to talk about one little thing, and we touched on it before, I think, in one of the other episodes we spoke about. I think it was when we interviewed you first time, but Aaron Bangham will tell you about in his organization, coats on the back of the chairs, they just don't do. And they just don't do, started by a man called Michael Smythe, who started the business. It must be 50 odd years ago now. I tell you what, that habit, they call it a culture. So that habit, the habit of time, and why I love that so much, such a small habit, it rubs off on everything else they do.
That's the tone.
It does set the tone.
Agreed.
Absolutely set the tone.
Yeah. So, I think, Skip, in summary for me, I think this is a really great book. This is a defining book. It's a must read. I think it's up there with, I think Chimp is great for people to understand, how they might perform unconsciously or what happens when the red mist comes down. I think this is a great one as a guidebook. So I think
Yeah,
this is well worth using as a reference. And I think there's a lot of value in people getting involved in this.
it's a great book. Listen, that just leaves me to say, what's next? What's the next book? I tell you what, there's so many good ones out there.
What have you got on your list? I've got a few in mind, but what have you got on your list?
I have got Magic of Thinking Big. I'm looking at them down here on my bookshelf. Okay, some of the ones I really love. You Can Do It. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's not for the sad people that have to spend their life on Tinder. Okay, I've got Gareth's favorite book. Okay, Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's down there. I'm having a look at the different books. Raising the Bar. I really love that. Where's some of the classics that we're going to go into next time? What do you think?
There's a couple that I've found as quite defining, and I think people will see them. We've spoken about them before. Good to Great.
Yep.
And I think Good to Great's a really flattering book. People tend to read it and go, "Oh, I'm just like that. That'll be me one day." I'm on that same journey. There's a second book in the series called How the Mighty Fall, and I've used that on a few occasions where it kind of talks about those that didn't do it, that eventually did not achieve what they wanted to do, and it's the warning signs. So there's kind of the whole, bell curve that people go over, where they buy into their own hype and hubris and ultimately don't see the signs. And by the time they see the signs, the runway's already running out of meters. So there's a couple of good ones there.
Why don't we? I'm going to say I'm up for that. Why don't we Good to Great? And why don't we? Do the two books tie into each other?
They do. They're really good, and you'll pick and choose which one you want. My favourite is How the Mighty Fall, but you need Good to Great as the context. So I think that might be good for our next one, if you're up for that.
Let's go for that. Good for Great sounds like a great plan.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, thank you very much for listening again. The idea of this is not for you just to think, oh, I know everything that's in the Atomic Habits now. I don't need it. Please go and get the book. Go and read it. Put it beside your bed and just start reading just a page a night. That's all we ask you to do. Anyway, I hope you like it. We'll see you next time. That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bowkett through LinkedIn.